Well, no matter what your weekend looked like, I know that it was better than the weekend that Xavier Worthy had for the Kansas City Chiefs. My goodness gracious. You wake up Saturday, and you may have started seeing some of the reports that the Chiefs' rising star, who had a couple of touchdowns in the Super Bowl after a great rookie season, found himself in a world of hurt after he was hit with domestic assault charges. Well, as it turned out, once we waited about, 12, 24 hours, that wasn't the case. Here we go.
You have breaking news and a story we brought you earlier. Lawyers for Chiefs wide receiver Xavier Worthy say the charges against him have been dropped. The star rookie was arrested in Texas last night on domestic violence charges. But again, those charges were dropped.
That from KCTV5. And in a statement, Xavier Worthy's attorneys, Chip Lewis and Sam Bassett, said their client was innocent of the charge against him. They said the allegation was made by a female who had been living in Worthy's home and that she had been asked to leave the home multiple times over the last 2 weeks upon discovery of her infidelity. She has refused to vacate the residence, has made a number of extortive efforts prior to resorting to this baseless allegation against Mr. Worthy. The complainant further destroyed a room in the residence, scratched Mr. Worthy's face, and ripped out parts of his hair, which there is photographic evidence of. Worthy told law enforcement at the time of the incident that he did not want to press charges against the complainant. So that is what happened with Xavier Worthy. It's believed, by the way, that this is tied back to Tia Jones, his fiance. So this is just, it's a mess. I'm glad that he has been able to clear his name in the span of 24 hours. But it does go to show you, Xavier Worthy may have dodged a bullet here with Tia Jones. It's crazy to think that the most important decision that you make in your life that will impact your career, impact obviously your family, impact how much you enjoy your life for decades to come is who you end up marrying. There is no decision that will have a bigger impact on literally every other facet of your existence than who you marry. And you can look at high-profile cases, athletes, celebrities, or you can look at people in your own life, right, who literally have had very different outcomes in life, in large part driven by who they chose to spend the rest of their life with. And now Xavier Worthy ends up in this just hot mess of a situation, and thankfully, he's going to be able to get out of this thing. But listen, this is the worst part of it, right? You end up in a situation where people see you getting charged, people see the accusations, and they say, okay, what did you do now? Now, I tweeted over the weekend when I saw the charges that the Chiefs should require their wide receivers to just play in the UFL so there's no offseason for these guys, because that seems like something that seems to cause some issues for them, shall we say. And I stand by that. People are like, oh, you gotta eat your words. Well, no, I stand by that. I didn't say Xavier Worthy was a criminal, but I said it seems like every offseason we've got some issues with this group, so just keep these guys playing football through the offseason. Let's go.
Don't let them go back to Texas.
Well, that's the other thing, man. Rashee Rice had his issues, of course, in Dallas last year on the highway in late March. And now Xavier Worthy back down in Central Texas as well. Rashee Rice went to SMU. Xavier Worthy went to the University of Texas down in Austin. So that as well. Maybe that's the better way to put it. Instead of us wearing them down playing UFL football, keep them in Kansas City. Keep them out of Texas, John.
We'll do it in the old days. We'll kick it old school, and we'll just pay them couple thousand, $50,000 a year, right? Now they got to work and sell some insurance in the offseason. They got to get a job or hit a sportscast.
Hey, we need a salesperson here. They can come over
like
here.
That'd help.
I think Xavier Worthy would be great on KCMO, hitting the streets, selling the product.
Pretty much that's how our first Super Bowl champions had to do it. They worked hard in the season and then had to get back to work in the offseason.
I like the sound of that, actually. Now we're on to something here. We got it all figured out on KCMO Talk Radio. So Xavier Worthy has these charges dropped. More will come out, I'm sure, in the days ahead. But this looked like a mess on Saturday, and by Sunday, you're sitting there saying to yourself, man, I feel for you, Xavier, and he appears to have dodged a bullet.
Yeah, she pulled his hair out,
yes,
for one thing. And then just last night on Instagram, he posted a photo of himself with a shaved head now.
Oh, did he?
So he actually got rid of the dreads. He had to get a whole new haircut because of what happened, essentially.
Wow. Okay. I never understood that, having the hair out like that, because you could have guys tackling you by your hair if it's too long coming out of the helmet. So now the fastest man in the NFL may have just gotten a little bit faster as well. Jeez, what a mess. Well, speaking of messes, over the weekend there was a big rally in Kansas City as well, down on the Plaza. I'm sure that you might have, well, you were only there if you stumbled upon it, because this was the craziest of crazy in Kansas City. It was led by someone who used to be an activist in Kansas City, Missouri. He's run for office and failed every time, and his name is Justice Horny. And he is somebody who considers himself, in a strange roundabout way, a modern-day Martin Luther King or something like that. It's just very weird how some of these people view themselves. So there was, it looked like maybe a couple hundred people down on the Plaza, and they were protesting bigoted Republicans at the state and federal level and do-nothing local Democrats in Kansas City. And the caption from Horn read, "We filled the plaza with hundreds of folks to remind local do-nothing Democrats and bigoted Republicans at the state and federal levels that people power will always be more powerful than political power." Now, I was looking at some of the folks who were out there on the plaza over the weekend and some of the signs they were holding up, and it was really a who's who of people, let's just put it this way, that don't seem all that joyful. Some of the signs, a lot of F Trump signs were out on the plaza. This was on Saturday. This is maybe my favorite sign. Trump says there are only two genders. He is wrong again. That was one of the signs I'm reading on the poster board here. Let's see, what else do we have here? A lot of Ukrainian signs as well. Kind of bizarre on that front. A lot of green hair out and about on the plaza over the weekend as well. So the green hair was out in full force at this rally on the plaza on Saturday. The people will defeat Trump's extreme right agenda. That sign also made the cut as well. You know, a lot of poster boards and things like that. So what's fascinating is the same people who claim the Democrats are doing nothing are literally just standing on the plaza on a Saturday afternoon yelling, making noise, and being as extreme to the other side as they possibly can, insisting that that is the answer, doubling down on the wokest, most progressive policies with some of the most progressive local failed politicians in Kansas City is apparently the way forward for the party in Missouri and in the United States in general. And nobody in their right mind possibly comes to that conclusion. Nobody looks at what happened in November, and whether you're in Missouri and you're looking at it from a local perspective or looking at it from a national perspective and says, you know what we need more of? You know what we definitely have to be doing right now? Doubling down on there being 17 genders. And might have only been 15 on this poster board, but you get the point. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 16 genders they wrote down here on this poster board. Trump says there are only two genders. He is wrong again. And they had 16 different signs, you know, like the male-female signs that exist with the little circle and the arrows in different directions. They had 16 different options written down there. So that apparently is the way forward. If you want to never win again in Missouri or nationally, please continue on. That will really go well for you, I promise. If you actually want to have some moment where you self-reflect and look in the mirror, well, then you will realize that is not the way forward. It's 6:15. Speaking of protests and rallies, did you see J.D. Vance got confronted while he was with his 3-year-old over the weekend? We'll get you the details on what happened there and the why behind it coming up next on 95.7 FM KCMO. We told you about the big protest out on the Plaza over the weekend. A couple hundred people down there holding the F Trump signs and the whole thing. I was not down there this weekend. If you were, if you had to drive through it, if God forbid you have to walk through it, I'd be curious to hear how that was at 913-408-7957. But on a national level, J.D. Vance, the vice president, got confronted walking through the streets of Cincinnati with his 3-year-old daughter. I kid you not. J.D. Vance got confronted by a bunch of protesters who were going to a pro-Ukraine rally. And they just happened to bump in to the vice president of the United States, who's just walking the streets with his 3-year-old. And it looked like, if you didn't see the video, I'll put her up on X at Pete Mundo. You can see it there. But it clearly was a fairly aggressive scene for a guy who's got a 3-year-old in a stroller. Now, no matter how you feel about J.D. Vance, no matter how you feel about any politician, walking up to them when you have him outnumbered, like, significantly, well, this individual is with a 3-year-old in a stroller, says much more about you than it does about him. These people are sleazeballs. And this is the kind of stuff that, regardless of how you feel politically, we have got to get it out of our political discourse. I'm not saying that you can't walk up to a politician on the streets and tell them how you feel. You can. You can also do it in a respectful manner. I would say that if you saw Emmanuel Cleaver on the streets of Kansas City.
You mustard moo.
There we go.
There you go. 622. I already dropped it on a Monday. Let's go, baby. If you saw Sharice Davids on a street corner, I don't care who it is. I don't care what side of the political aisle they are on. I would say you have every right to voice your opinion to an elected official. But there's a way to do it. And this, well, this is not it at all.
America's Hitler. What changed? Cell phone video shows the moment Vice President J.D. Vance was approached by pro-Ukraine protesters in Cincinnati, Ohio. People are dying. The protesters were on their way to a pro-Ukraine rally nearby when the chance encounter with the vice president occurred.
My 3-year-old daughter now, and I told you, I talked to you for 5 minutes.
Signed up for this job.
And now,
that's what you agreed. Yeah,
I did
why
not agree
people are
to have my
yelling at him?
3-year-old to have people run around and yell at her.
You signed up for this. I'm just stopping it right there. Notice how he goes, listen, I've got my 3-year-old. I'm not going to sit here and get yelled at. You signed up for this. Is there anything worse right now in American culture than the old super woke liberal white lady? There isn't. Just in case you want the answer, there isn't. And this is a prime example of why. Those are the people who are heckling J.D. Vance, the gray-haired Subaru driving, in this house we believe sign-bearing individuals who are super loud on Facebook and super aggressive and super miserable, I will add. These are the most miserable people in our society today. And they tell J.D. Vance, as he's walking around this 3-year-old, you signed up for this. No, I mean, listen, there's plenty that he signed up for. He knew the risk that he was taking becoming the vice president to Donald Trump. Did he sign up for getting harassed and heckled by large groups of old super woke ladies in Cincinnati with his 3-year-old who's getting nervous and scared in the moment sitting in a stroller? As a father of a 3-year-old, I'm sitting there and I'm saying to myself, I'm infuriated for him watching this. Now, the difference is my 3-year-old might have walked up to these women and kicked them in the knee. That's what my 3-year-old might have done. If there were a bunch of men, she might have kicked them somewhere else. But she wouldn't have given a rip. But J.D. Vance's kids might be better behaved than mine. I don't know. But that's what my 3-year-old would have done. I'll just say that much. But to sit there and watch this video unfold, as if somehow they're going to get some concession out of J.D. Vance. He's going to be sitting there on the streets of Cincinnati. He actually didn't know how these people felt. He's like, you know what? I never thought of that point. That's you know what? Next time I see Zelensky, I'm going to say that. That is not to say that you don't have a right to voice your opinion to your public servants. That's what these people are. But there's a right and a wrong way to do it.
Wrong saddle.
Exactly. They certainly invaded Ukraine in 2022.
And 2014. And Georgia and Chechnya. They are the aggressor every time.
I understand that that's your view, and
No,
certainly
that's not our view. It's the truth. You call Trump America.
On the text line, Pete, why act like J.D. Vance has no Secret Service protection? I never said he didn't have any Secret Service protection. I didn't say J.D. Vance's life was at risk. That's not the point. The point is, if you deal with 3-year-olds, if you deal with young children, you put them in a spot there where he's trying to be polite to American citizens. He knows exactly how this is going to go, and he kept us cool. He's trying to be polite to American citizens. That's what he's doing. And on the other side, he's not getting an ounce of it. It's eerily reminiscent of what we saw in Congress last week. What you're seeing right now is a resistance that doesn't really have any cohesion to it and is just based in absolute misery. There's nothing that you can do that's going to make some of these individuals feel better about themselves or feel better about the country. And if doubling down on Ukraine, if that is the thing, just like we talked about here locally, doubling down on 16 genders, if doubling down on Ukraine is what you think is going to win over people that have left the party, you are completely out of touch with the moment. And if you think harassing and heckling a guy who's walking the streets with his 3-year-old daughter is the best way forward, I'm going to show him, then you are more out of touch than I would have thought. 913-408-7957 on the text line and the studio line here on KCMO Talk Radio. Pete, luckily my Brookside neighbor changed their BLM sign to a Ukraine-colored tape for the tree on the city easement. I was worried that they didn't have another cause. That's well done.
No love for Lesotho.
Coming up next, did Team Trump hear a part of this show last week that resulted in a big announcement? We'll get to it on KCMO. Can't help but wonder, just a small part of me wondering whether or not Team Trump was listening to this show 1 week ago today when we shared some exclusive news with you here on KCMO about the debacle that has been World Cup planning in Kansas City. Because on Friday, Donald Trump signed an executive order establishing a White House task force for the 2026 World Cup. Trump will serve as the chair of the task force, while J.D. Vance will serve as the vice chair. An executive director who has not been named will manage and oversee daily operations. What's the goal of this task force? Because we know this has been sloppy here in Kansas City and how it's been handled. But the goal of the task force will be to oversee preparations for the tournament and will comprise Trump's cabinet and key government agencies. According to the official, the task force will also work with federal agencies in planning, organizing, and executing the World Cup. So you've got obviously a bunch of cities here in the U.S., including Kansas City, who are hosting games. It's in 16 cities, 48 teams playing 104 total matches. In the U.S., you've got Kansas City, along with Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Houston, Dallas, Atlanta, Miami, Boston, Philadelphia, and East Rutherford, New Jersey. And last week, we shared with you first here on KCMO that this process has not been smooth the last few weeks. Over the last few weeks, the Chiefs were supposed to start construction out at Arrowhead Stadium to basically renovate the stadium to have it ready for the World Cup next summer. And the Chiefs balked. They were supposed to start this the week the AFC Championship game happened. They delayed it about a month. They started about 10 days ago, from what I heard from people out there who were in the know at Arrowhead Stadium. Why did they delay it a month? Well, because they went to KC 2026, which is this organization that is overseeing the World Cup for Kansas City. And they said, oh, by the way, we need $10 million to start this. And KC 2026 said, no, you don't. We're not giving you any money. And the Chiefs said, no, we need $10 million. We need it because of lost revenues over the next couple of summers from concerts and events because of the World Cup we're hosting. Now, I don't understand that. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, you're going to make a lot of money off the World Cup, right? And yes, you have to remove some seats, but you agreed to do this. Clark Hunt is one of the reasons the World Cup is coming to Kansas City, along with Cliff Illig, who owns Sporting KC. So all of a sudden it's like, wait, we need $10 million for what? That didn't make any sense to me. And it still doesn't make any sense to me outside of being a power play.
We're trying to lift our presence on the stage as a city that can host these things so that we don't have these problems in Chicago or East Rutherford. They don't have to expand the stadium. We kind of look like goobers collectively, no matter who's at fault here.
We do.
Because now we have to make an adjustment to our stadium that seems to be lagging in its schedule.
That's exactly what's happening right now. So what happened here, from what I heard from the people who are on this KC 2026 board and people who are in the know who are not on the board, is that basically the mayor acquiesced to the Chiefs. And he said, fine, we'll give you some money. We'll give you millions of dollars. But here's the catch. I want an extra seat on the board, on the KC 2026 board. Now, why does he want that? I can't quite figure that part out. I don't know if it's just a power play for the preparations for the World Cup next year or what the deal is. But there are multiple local politicians and business executives who are on this KC 2026 board. You've got Clark Hunt and Cliff Illig. You have Kathy Nelson, KC Sports Commissioner, CEO. You have local politicians, Mike Kelly, Johnson County Chairman, Melissa Robinson, Kansas City Councilwoman, Frank White's on the board, Dina Sykes, who's a state senator from Kansas. You have some notable politicians and business leaders who are on this board. Why the mayor wants another seat on the board, I don't know. But that was apparently the deal that was cut to get the Chiefs moving because they got to get a deal done here. They have to get moving on this thing to be ready for the World Cup next summer.
Q maybe has his eye on the Monarch schedule opening up and Frank being out at first base.
Maybe that's
we need somebody to speak up for the area.
Hey, he's looking at the Monarchs road schedule and saying, we got some key meetings while Frank's going to be out of town with the Monarchs. So we got to get something figured out here. No, that could very well be true, John. I hadn't thought about that angle. But right now, you've got the city. It's not your taxpayer money. Let's also be clear on this. This is money that has been raised by this KC 2026 organization. They're the ones who are dispersing this money, but they got to fundraise through a lot of very wealthy people around Kansas City. So that's where the money's coming from. Just to be clear, it's not your money unless you are someone who gave KC 2026 a fat 7-figure check. Now, the other part of this is the money that has been given from the state of Missouri to help with renovations out at the sports complex, notably for Arrowhead. Just so we're all on the same page, the state of Missouri is given $41 million. Well, it's about $50 million in last year's budget to renovations for Arrowhead Stadium in preparation for the World Cup. That was sent to the Jackson County Sports Authority. That's the authority that oversees the Truman Sports Complex for the Chiefs and the Royals. They have the $50 million. It is not in the hands of KC 2026, and thank goodness it's not. I trust that money much more in the hands of the Sports Authority than I do a bunch of politicians and people looking for favors. I'm not saying that the Sports Authority is going to be the purest, but I trust it much more in the hands of those people than I do anybody in politics locally. And just so you know, KC 2026 tried to basically tell the Sports Authority, we'll take care of that $50 million for you. And the Sports Authority told them to pound sand, which is exactly what they should have done. Do not give this to KC 2026. The less money they're in charge of, frankly, the better. Now, if it's private people's money, if you want to give fat checks to Quentin Lucas and Frank White and Mike Kelly to do God knows what with, please be my guest. If you're trying to buy political favors, that's on you. That's your prerogative. If you think it's going to be well spent, you're a sucker. But you have every right to be a sucker. But when it comes to our taxpayer monies, no, that should stay in the hands of the Jackson County Sports Authority. And then basically what happens is the Chiefs give their receipts to the Sports Authority, and they say, hey, we spent $1 million here, $1 million there. They got to show the receipts. It's not a blank check. And that's exactly how it's supposed to be and how it should be with this project moving forward. But already it sounds like the mess is in Kansas City, and I imagine other cities in the country, is what resulted in Donald Trump signing this executive order on Friday to establish a White House task force for FIFA World Cup 2026. And already I regret this thing for the U.S. I hope it goes well. I really do. I'm not saying this to be like an anti-soccer guy. I'm not. I really hope it goes well for Kansas City. I hope it goes well for North America. But FIFA's always been a sketchy organization at best. This stuff feels like it rarely returns anything decent on its investment. And now we've got the president wasting his time on executive orders to put on soccer games next year. There's a lot of stuff to fix in the country and do for the country. And now Donald Trump having to oversee putting on a soccer event in this country feels like an enormous waste of time and resources. There is something happening on a very key issue on one side of the political aisle, and I am fascinated by it. 8:05, good morning, happy Monday. Glad you're here on KCMO. There is a movement away from men competing in women's sports. The question is, how does the left get out of it? This conversation kickstarted last week when Gavin Newsom, the California governor, launched his podcast with Charlie Kirk, who is a conservative commentator, radio, podcast, does the whole deal, YouTube, everything else. And Gavin Newsom admitted that it is inherently unfair to have men in women's sports. And now there is a movement to figure out how to get out of this deal.
Like, you right now should come out and be like, you know what? The young man who's about to win the state championship in the long jump in female sports, right, that shouldn't happen. You as the governor should step out and say no.
No, and I appreciate
but like, would you do something like that? Would you say no men in female sports?
Well, I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you on that. So that's easy to call out, the unfairness of that. There's also a humility and a grace.
All right, stop right there, Gavin Newsom. He opened up the door to his party, admitting that they have been on the wrong side of this. And this was a topic that came up over the weekend in multiple Sunday shows. You had, let's start with, where do we want to start here? There were a couple of them, actually, 3 of them. Let's start with Adam Schiff. What does Trump call him? Adam Schiff, the California congressman. They call him like pencil neck.
Shifty Shift.
Yeah, that's right. Shifty Shift, pencil neck. I don't know. He's got a few nicknames for the guy. So Adam Schiff is on ABC, and he gets asked about the issue. And I'll tell you what, they are now going to go down the road of, we think this is a local issue. They're going to try to stay out of it.
Look, I played in sports. Our kids played in sports. I want all young people to have the experience of playing in sports. Every young person. And I want those sports to be fair. I want those sports to be safe. And I have confidence that local schools and local communities can make those decisions without the federal government making them for them.
But is he right on that? Is he right on that?
I think to the degree, though, I think as a political matter, that we remove the focus from where most Americans are concerned, and that is they're concerned about their ability to provide for their family. I think to the degree that we get away from that, that's a mistake.
So now they're going down the road of, well, this is like a local issue. Wow. Nothing like finding yourself on the wrong side of an 80-20 issue and trying to figure out how to wiggle your way out of it by setting up the whole, we're going to let the local communities figure it out. They are trapped on the issue, and they are totally incoherent on the issue. And on top of that, I guess the Dems are in favor of abolishing the Department of Education and government mandates. That would be my understanding of this. See, they have twisted themselves into such a pretzel on this thing. They're mad about the Department of Education possibly going away. They love government mandates. They always have. But now on this issue, they're trying to wiggle out of it and back out of it by being like, well, that'll be handled locally. We'll stay out of that because they know they're on the wrong side. I mean, they spent the last 5 years basically supporting this craziness, supporting men and women's bathrooms, supporting men and women's sports, supporting women losing to men in athletics under the guise of, equality, which is insane to suggest. But it's the hill they chose to die on. And now, as they're like one final shot away from getting killed on the issue, they're like, wait, I don't want to die on this hill anymore. That's what's happening. They realize the American people overwhelmingly disagree with them on this. These are not 60-40 issues. These are easily 80-20 issues. And the whole idea of like standing up for women, I guess, is a distant memory for them. Because that's how they should be, and that's how this conversation should be framed. We are protecting women's sports. And as the father of 3 young daughters, that's how it should be framed. Protecting women in their own athletics. Like last week at Trump's speech, who did he have up there? He had up a young lady who, got concussed after she got spiked in the face in a volleyball game by a dude? Like, who's going to defend that? Who is possibly going to defend that? So that's how you get Adam Schiff shifting his way around that conversation. And then on NBC's Meet the Press yesterday, Elise Slotkin, senator from Michigan, also in a tough spot. And what does she go back to? Same thing as Schiff, local control.
Senator, do you agree with Governor Newsom?
Well, look, I think, you'll have to talk to Mr. Newsom and his podcast, and we're all talking about it now because it's, good controversy. For me, I grew up playing 3 seasons of sports. In Michigan, sports is like our religion, right? I wouldn't be here, I think, without the leadership training that I got in women's sports.
Oh, answer the question.
But for me, it's like, let the local community figure this out, right? In Michigan, we have a process in place where if someone who's born a boy wants to play in women's sports, you have to get a waiver. We've had it happen 2 times in our entire state. So let the local communities, just like everything with schools, handle that issue. For me, though, I think, this issue is being sort of brought up in order to make sparks and see sparks fly.
Avoid, push down local. We're not involved with this. Listen, it's a simple question. Do you think a guy should be able to play a volleyball game and spike a girl in the face? Yes or no? Just answer the question. It's really not a difficult question. It's a yes or no question. Do you think that should be allowed? Are you okay with that? Do you accept that? Do you want more of that? Don't say, it doesn't happen that frequently. A lot of bad things don't happen that frequently, but we can all agree they're bad things, right? This is the same kind of a deal. Do you think this is bad or not? Do you think this is fair to young women or not? That's it. But you can tell they're trying to back off the issue. They've gone too far. Now, I don't think the protesters in Kansas City over the weekend got the national memo. There was a big rally down on the Plaza this weekend. Looks like, 200-300 people showed up with signs ripping bigoted Republicans and do-nothing Democrats. This was on the Plaza Saturday afternoon. And there were a lot of signs out there. And I think my favorite one was this, that once again ties into this whole thing that these individuals don't realize what happened in November and why things turned out the way they did. Here's a sign that I'm looking at from Saturday's protest down on the Plaza. Trump says there are only 2 genders, and it has the circle arrow to the right and circle plus sign down for, women and men. And the sign reads, and it's being held up by some old guy, big old white beard, probably 70 years old. Looks like he maybe got lost and someone's paying him to hold up the sign. I'm not quite sure. But he says, Trump says there are only 2 genders. He is wrong again. And the guy has those circles, where you would draw out different genders. And he has 16 different options on there. 16 different options. It's like, brother, I don't know what you're smoking. I know that, you can now smoke in Missouri. And trust me, where was I the other day when I was at T-Mobile last week chaperoning a kindergarten trip? I walked into the men's room. I'm like, gosh, this thing smells and reeks of weed. This is not cool. But, man, you got some good stuff over there if you think there are 16 different options. 913-408-7957 on KCMO. Jay's in Gladstone. Go ahead, Jay.
Hey, Pete, good morning. I'm a little confused. Are these the same Democrats that were so upset about Roe versus Wade being sent back to the local people to figure things out? Now wanting things figured out by the locals?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point. That is part of the hypocrisy here, Jay. Thank you. They love federal government power. They love centralized power on basically everything, except for now, the guy showing up in the girls' volleyball game and spiking a girl in the face and knocking her unconscious. That should be handled locally. Everything else, we'll keep that with a growing bureaucracy at the federal level. Thank you, Jay. I appreciate that note. I had a great clip from Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary, that I cannot play for you because X is currently down. It is not loading. I had a great clip from the Treasury Secretary. He was on CNBC this morning, and I wanted to share that with you because the markets are taking a nosedive this morning. NASDAQ's off 3% this morning, 500 points. The Dow is off 400 points, about 1%, and the S&P is off 100 points, which is just shy of 2%. So that's what's happening now. Just here in the last few minutes. And listen, the last month has not been a good one for the Dow, going back to February. So we all know that in really any of the markets. They've all been down over the last few weeks. We know that's happening. It's a combination of things going on. The media will tell you it's all about Doge, and it's also about tariffs. It's not that simple. The markets rode Joe Biden's fake economy to record highs. Yes, it was a fake economy propped up by trillions in dollars in government spending that we did not have and now have to pay back on. $36 trillion in debt, $2 trillion annual deficits, unsustainable. Starting during COVID under Trump, if you want to be fair. There's one big mistake of Donald Trump's first term, the biggest one, overspending, especially during COVID. But Biden, of course, put gasoline on the fire and made it exponentially worse than it ever needed to be.
Luckily, we shut down the revenue stream there of people paying back their student loans. So, that was fortunate.
So now we sit here having to clean up the mess. And Scott Bessent was on CNBC this morning, and I'm going to paraphrase it here since I can't play the audio because X is down. And he basically said, listen, the markets were up 20% last year under Biden and 20% the year before that under Biden. And the American people put Donald Trump in the White House because they didn't like the state of the economy. The markets are not Main Street. The markets are not the economy. There is a world where the stock market can do well and Main Street can do well. That's a best case scenario. We had a lot of that from 2016 until 2019 pre-COVID. We did not have that the last 2-3 years. It's why you're seeing a realignment of the political parties. The whole idea of the country club Republican. Don't get me wrong, that still exists, but a lot of those people magically became liberals. Why? Well, they fell for the culture wars hook, line, and sinker. They got a lot of white guilt. They got a lot of shame at their cocktail parties. And a lot of them were living off the markets anyway. And Democrats, with their government spending, largely good for the markets and propped up the markets. So they were kind of cool with it. So when you combine government spending, driving equities, driving the stock market, with a lot of shame and white guilt, that's how you get a new constituency of liberals. The problem is the working class was getting screwed. And you saw this political realignment during the last election, where the Republican Party became much more of a working class, bigger tent party. 90% of our counties moved to the right. It doesn't mean 90% of counties are Republican. They moved or shifted to the right. The Bronx shifted to the right in New York City. L.A. County shifted to the right. They're still blue counties, but they moved to the right. And that's in large part because of the economy. So Scott Besson is saying, listen, and this was me paraphrasing him this morning since I can't play you the clip because X is down. We are doing things that we believe need to happen to reset the economy, reset the marketplace, and the stock market might not like it, but guess what? Joe Biden had a great stock market, and how did that work out for the Democrats the last couple of years? Not well. Because Main Street is not the stock market. And this is also something that, Donald Trump was asked about yesterday by Maria Bartiromo during their sit-down on Fox Business Network, and here's what he said.
You said, look, we're going to have a disruption, but we're okay with that. Is that what you meant? The stock market going down was the disruption? What other disruption were you alluding to?
Look, what I have to do is build a strong country. You can't really watch the stock market. If you look at China, they have a 100-year perspective. We have a quarter. We go by quarters.
That's true.
And you can't go by that. You have to do what's right. What we're doing is we're building a tremendous foundation for the future. Tremendous foundation.
Now, here's the crazy part, or the unfortunate part. There is a world where this actually costs the Republican Party politically, because we have short-term memories and we want somebody to fix things right now. That doesn't mean it's the wrong thing to do, but there is a world where that does happen.
I liken this to people who are trying to micromanage their house being built, right? Got to do the foundation. Guys come in, they pour the foundation out. Oh, I can't build on this. This is wet, right? No, you wait for it to set up. You know, it's stages.
Yes.
Right? But people don't understand that, do they? But it'd be the same thing. I can't build on a wet foundation.
Well, think about it too, right? I mean, Joe Biden gave you a foundation that was cracked.
Mm-hmm.
It was a broken foundation. Joe Biden built a house, to use John's analogy, where the top floor looks great. But then you start kind of going through the home and you get the inspectors involved and you're like, man, this thing is a house of cards. That's what he built. An unsustainable house of cards driven by unsustainable government spending.
And if you're in Jackson County, that's worth 25% more than last year.
Yep, that's true. Doug in Overland Park, what's up, buddy?
Hey, Pete. Man, I love your show. And you're spot on. You already kind of hit on what my take is. Listen, guys, we can't just change this overnight. The fact is they've come in, they have tamped down the federal government, got things to where they need to be, and this is a result of Biden's awful policies that are actually causing all these problems with the markets. They're going to have to get back to a regular footing, and it's going to take some time. And this economy has sucked for a long time. I've been experiencing change in my business for about 3 or 4 years. It's not even close to what it once was. And so people are going to have to understand that it's not going to change overnight. And we've got to do these things in order to get it back. Biden was just awful. And as far as I'm concerned, let's go, Brandon. We don't need you guys like that again.
I haven't heard that one in a while. Thank you very much there. I didn't have Let's Go Brandon on the bingo card this morning, but here we are on a Monday. It's great to have you here, and thank you for that, Doug. You're right. I mean, this thing is going to get a reset, and frankly, it needs a reset in the worst way.